In the 2022 Sight and Sound poll, critics poll, Beau Travail, number 7, the greatest film of all time. You're thinking to yourself, that's rather high. Upon rewatch, oh, it's in the top 10 films of all time. Like, okay, there's no problem, no harm, no foul. The critic, Stephen Holden, has a famous phrase about Beau Travail: voluptuous austerity. And I think that voluptuous austerity is so present in all of Denis' works, from the Chocolat all the way through, High Life and her later films as well. But Beau Travail is certainly where we get austerity at its most voluptuous. And I think that she is brilliant because she uses her unique experience to the greatest effect. I mean, Chocolat is all about growing up a colonizer in Cameroon, where she grew up. And Beau Travail is all about the French Foreign Legion is a collection of people that aren't from France that all agree to team up and train, and there's a great, there's a good spirit de corps, and
it's an international army. Yeah.
Right. And in French cinema in the past, like with our military, of course, the French Foreign Legion's amazing, and they're brilliant, and they're bold, and they're adventurous, and it's sexy, and it's cool. But of course they were, bizarre and miserable colonizing force. So I love this French Foreign Legion we get in this film, Brett, where it's like the 90s. They have nothing to do.
Yeah. It's a movie that you don't forget after you've seen it. It really sticks with you. And like Joe was saying there are several scenes, in fact, that are ostensibly just a military training ritual out in the desert. But it seems like some sort of role-playing fetish scenario that we're getting, right? It's like there are so many things where it's like there's a scene where they're all learning how to iron clothes,
right.
and then the commandant is watching them, and you could easily convince me without context that this is not an actual army. This is a rich guy who pays handsome young men to come over and iron clothes, and he watches them. There's a lot of it that feels like role-playing, that feels like fetish, all of which is emphasized by this incredibly arid, bleak, empty landscape that they're all in. There's a shot early on in the movie that kind of summarizes it when they're all headed out to the desert to train, and you see this massive cannon or sort of Gulf War era gun just sort of abandoned out in the desert. And that's kind of the vibe of the entire movie, is that you don't know, they're not really training for anything. But they approach that training with absolute commitment and intensity, as though they're all about to be shipped off to D-Day. But in fact, they're just training in a sort of vacuum in this dreamy world that Denis creates for them to train in. And Denis, first and foremost, is a master of mood. And I want to talk about how mood works in this movie, because I was complaining on the Oscars special about how one of my least favorite things in movies is this excess of text we keep getting on the screen. Chapters. Oh my God, I don't need a movie to have chapters. I don't need excessive crawls at the beginning unless they're sort of, fun and campy. I don't need subtitles to titles and all of this stuff, all right? Just let me watch the movie. Let me ease into the movie. Let me kind of figure out what the movie is about. That's part of the implicit agreement between a director and an audience, and Denis understands that, because we don't get a line of dialogue until the 7-minute mark of this movie, and yet you are so immersed in the world at that point. She doesn't need dialogue because she uses mood. She uses a composite of images, music, pacing, sense of place. And mood is this thing that is everything in the movie, but can easily become sort of nothing unless the director has a vision that guides it all. And Denis has a vision and then some. Beau Travail, like Joe's been saying, is about masculinity as ritual.
One of the best movies I've ever seen.
One of the best movies ever. Number 7 is not an exaggeration on the all-time list.
No, it actually isn't.
Beau Travail truly has an argument as being one of the greatest movies of all time.